First of all, Jason, I want to congratulate you on your forthcoming book, Blocked on Weibo, What Gets Suppressed on China's Version of Twitter and Why. So let's start in, perhaps you can talk about the project.
The project itself began with just a single image that a professor of mine showed in graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh. My professor showed this very incredibly stark chart which showed the sort of online traffic and searches within China in a particular region, Xinjiang. Several years ago, there were protests there related to the death of a Uyghur folks in Guangdong. And these riots took place in Xinjiang, and one of the responses the Chinese government did was to actually just shut off the internet. What you can see on this chart is just a total drop-off of the traffic, and for 10 months roughly, there was no internet in Xinjiang. And I thought that was just a really stunning sense of how much control the Chinese government has. The more I learned about it, the more complex it seemed, that there's all sorts of other censorship tactics that they take that aren't simply on-off switches, that aren't purely black and white. One of the projects I envisioned was to look at this particular Chinese social media site, Weibo, Sina Weibo in particular, which is sort of an analog to Twitter. You could post these 140-character messages online and it's served up on your own microblog page. But when you try and search for certain keywords, it actually will tell you, I'm sorry, according to relevant laws, we can't show you any of the results. And the obvious inference is because of censorship. So what I did was I tried to systematically go through basically the biggest list of keywords that I could think of, which was and the most up-to-date list, which is Wikipedia's list of titles. So I just ran it through and uncovered roughly 500 unique keywords that are blocked on Weibo. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to share with everyone, not only the list, but try and give a sense of why these particular keywords are sensitive. And so I try and give context on my blog, what the motives are for both the authorities and for the users using them, why these terms are sensitive and how they got to be that way. So that's what the blog is, and the book sort of takes off from there.
There are a couple of entries that I thought would be interesting to, if you would talk a little bit about them.
Sure.
Like Jiang Zemin.
Yeah, absolutely. Jiang Zemin is clearly a sensitive topic within China. He's a politician. Many politicians are. One of the perks of the job of being a politician in China is that you almost get a blanket protection from criticism online. There was actually a rumor that started abounding a couple of years ago with regards to whether he was still alive, because he hadn't been seen in public for many weeks, and there was chatter, oh, maybe he's dead, the government was covering it up. At some point, the government started to crack down on these sorts of discussions. Jiang Zemin, like many other politicians, very sensitive online, but he in particular, because he's a titan and an elder within the Chinese political system, he's especially sensitive. It's very important to remember that there are events and people driving this sort of censorship. It's not a monolithic state that just hands down a list. These are people, these are individuals, these are people within the bureaucracy, within companies, and they actually have to think about not only general trends within government. For instance, if a major politician makes a speech, they have to pick up on these sorts of cues on their own, but they also have to recognize sensitive periods, particular regions that might be. There's a lot of factors to take into consideration when they perform this sort of censorship, because they've recognized that the sort of on-off switches aren't very smart, because people don't like those sorts of things.
I think a lot of your entries and your discussion of them also exposes and reflects this layer of complexity, is that the Weibo users themselves have a whole panoply of tactics to operate in this kind of complex, not static, often unpredictable environment. Perhaps you can describe some of the tactics that you actually see, that yes, these are block words sometimes, but there's also a very wide range of creative tactics.
Absolutely, and I think the best part of my research was uncovering these sorts of creative usages. So take Li Peng, for example. Peng, which is his given name, is composed of 3 different components, yue and niao, so like month, and bird. And what netizens have done is actually, instead of referring to him as his proper official name, Li Peng, what they do is refer to him as these 3 components, month, bird, as a code way of referring to him. And I think it's just fascinating to see the creativity that users have resorted to, because that's what they need to do. But unfortunately, the censors caught wind of this. They now have blocked that. So now the netizens have to develop other creative ways to refer to him. And it's a constant game, using homophones, homonyms, using images, basically encode actual characters within images, so making the job harder for censors to right away flag down sensitive comments. So that's just a few of the tactics, and obviously memes also are becoming a major thing. The Tankman image, but with the tanks replaced with rubber ducks. This is, something playful, but still speaks to users on Weibo and can provide an entryway into political discussion without being overtly, a punch to the face to the censors.
Actually, you're also offering a layer of complexity beyond cat and mouse, so that when you talk about in framing, looking at censorship, you're not saying that it's the government and then the people, but you're also looking at companies, the role of companies, both foreign and Chinese companies at every level, and then thirdly, citizens themselves, so the netizens themselves, both in terms of self-censorship as well as the kinds of citizen action that we are seeing online. Can you comment on that aspect of the complexity of the picture?
Obviously, these companies and citizens take their cues from the government, but it is much more complex than purely a top-down government orders everyone don't talk about these issues. But it's not clear what exactly is on the line of destabilizing and not destabilizing. And clearly there are consequences for not restricting content adequately. Although it's never quite clear when the hammer gets laid down by the governments, and I think that's what Perilyn calls the anaconda and the chandelier. It's a feature of the censorship system that companies don't know when the government will strike, but it's very clear that they have and they will again. So what happens is they purposely over-censor, they self-censor, and they develop these lists on their own. And that's to the government's advantage. They can decentralize these efforts, let the companies do their work for them. As for the other layers, obviously the citizens themselves, and these netizens, I think that's among the more fascinating things.
In thinking about self-censorship, at the end of May in 2012, Sina introduced the community management system, in which anyone could volunteer for the community, could be part of policing the content that is posted on the Weibo. So it's a pretty complex system, but basically we were interested in, well, what happens between the person being reported on, you're the poster, and me reporting on you. And we saw that overwhelming majority that the person reporting on the unacceptable post won. That is, the post either got deleted, taken down, or the person got some points taken away. And there's another part of it that I wanted to throw into this picture that's complex. And the other part of it is that there's a whole universe of posts that we never see. And that universe is directly managed and handled by the Sina management team. And in the black hole, we don't know how many. We don't know anything about how they get resolved. What we do know is what the category is, and that is posts that are threatening to national security, insulting to the Chinese government's reputation abroad, etc. So I think that adds to the complexity of the strategies that both companies and the official to build what I think you can describe as a tolerance for censorship.
I think the details of the study that you guys have done is incredibly fascinating, and as researchers, that's one of the ways that we could sort of peer into this black hole by tracking the sort of data that we have available to us. one of the tools that researchers like me have used for researching Weibo is Weiboscope, which was developed by HKU. It's actually more than just a tool. It's a way for visualizing what posts are deleted from Weibo, and it's a little hard to use, so users may want to go to a website called Free Weibo, and there you can actually see the type of posts that are being deleted from Weibo, and it is, like you said, a vast array of things that are completely unacceptable as in terms of what type of content we should be promoting to children or to our fellow citizens. So, violent things in nature, but there's also this array of posts that are actually further discussion, maybe talk about political issues or talk about other sensitive matters that get disappeared from the web.
So, on balance, looking forward, given that this space is expanding and exploding really so quickly in this exponential way, it starts at 3 million, 5 million, 100 million, 400 million. Looking ahead and knowing how complex the picture is with the citizen space and how this development of the civil society space. Are you hopeful?
I am hopeful. I think certainly what we've started to see is that what the government is doing is seemingly effective. The censorship is still taking place. There are citizens who are navigating around these sorts of things, but seemingly the majority of citizens are willing to accept these certain restrictions that the government has placed on them. But I think what's more valuable is that there is now a pathway forward. There is a sort of discussion online about what we can and cannot do, perhaps. What's taking place now is that citizens are learning that they're able to hold not only fellow users accountable, but also politicians and their political leaders. It's amazing to see still people petitioning the government, even when they've seen so much repression and that sort of work to happen. But obviously the online sphere, I think, can supplement and allow people avenues towards a greater amount of potential transparency in the future.
I know that when your book comes out, that it will continue to provoke more discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Sharon.